the answer for me, it's important that we understand what introversion really is, that we understand our strengths, that we therefore can practice our strengths. If we're great planners, how can we embed that into our day so that we can be better prepared to lead?
Hello, and welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we will air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. When Steve Friedman wrote his memoir, In Search of Courage, he realized a common thread of introversion he thought was a curse all of his life was actually a blessing. For years, he wore a mask at work and coped with his stress by sacrificing his health and personal relationships. Now he embraces his own introversion as a toolkit to become a happier person. He retired from corporate America and now enjoys sharing articles, books, quizzes, and resources through his website, beyondintroversion.com.
All right. I'm very excited to have our guest, Steve Friedman. Steve Friedman's the author of In Search of Courage, an introvert story. That's his first book. And his second book, which came out earlier this month, is The Corporate Introvert, How to Lead and Thrive with Confidence. And he's also the creator of beyondintroversion.com. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much, David. Thrilled to be here.
Excited to have you. And I wanted to share a quote that you gave me, Steve. So you said, I finally realized to be happy, I don't need to change myself. I just need to be myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. I discovered that myself. So Steve, tell us a little bit more about your introversion and your journey to discover, who you were and how to embrace your introversion.
Yeah, the quote that you just shared seems so simple. But I know for me, and I think for a lot of people, that's a long journey to get to that point. It was for me, and it was kind of a struggle. I can kind of relate my background in something that I share on my website, which is 5 phases of introversion. And so the first one is just unaware. So, like many people, I grew up, and when I was a little kid or even a teenager, I didn't know about introversion. I don't think I ever heard the word introversion. I just knew I was different. For one thing, I had 3 older sisters. We get along splendidly, but they're all extroverts. So on a Saturday afternoon, mom would open up the door and we'd all run outside, or she'd kind of nudge me outside to go play with the kids. Half hour later, I was ready to come back in and do some stuff inside and just relax and do some of my hobbies or whatever. My sisters were out and about almost all day. They'd come home for dinner. We'd have dinner. And then next thing you know, they're on the phone battling to get the phone line, right? To talk to the same people they talk to all day. And I just couldn't understand that. And I don't think my parents really could understand that. And so I felt different for that reason and other reasons. But I wasn't sure what that was or why I felt different. I just did. And then, I think I was probably in my early 20s. I just started working in corporate America, and they gave us a personality test. And so it said that I was an introvert, which, I'd heard the word at that point, but didn't really associate with it. And that kind of pushed me into the second phase, which is uninformed. So suddenly I had this label, and labels can serve a purpose. But I had this label and I didn't really have a lot of information with it. So to me, I assumed the definition that floats around in most of society, and even today still is in dictionaries and thesauruses, horrible things like loners and antisocial, wallflowers, icicles, narcissists. Horrible things. And one of the ones that I really love is not an extrovert. So we're defined by what we're not, by the seemingly majority of society. And those kind of things stuck with me, and I think stick with a lot of people. And we can say later on, perhaps, oh, those are so wrong. But when we're younger and just don't know, I was very uninformed. And so I accepted those, and it really hit my self-esteem, and it was difficult as I started the corporate work life. It took me a long time after that before I kind of ran upon information and became curious enough to learn what it truly meant. And that for me was kind of the third period of enlightenment. Suddenly I read Susan Cain's book, Quiet, right? And all these other resources started to come to me. And I realized that it's not a curse, it's a blessing. And that there's so many traits that we have that we should be proud of, but I was really kind of hiding them because I was kind of living in fear of myself. And once I got through that phase, it let me get through the other two phases of contentment and flourishing, just really being comfortable with who I was. But honestly, for me, that happened probably late in my 40s. And other people that I talk to on my website are telling me they're in their 50s, 60s, or 70s before they reach that. And I think I can understand it, certainly. And I think that it's just an opportunity for people like ourselves to kind of share our stories and share the hope and opportunity to accelerate that journey, because it was, fairly traumatic for much of my life.
Yeah. So I did read your first book, and I remember, I related a lot to what you said. There was a young boy with a great imagination, right? But misunderstood, wanting, being pushed to do more than, was natural to you and that you wanted to do. And it wasn't talked about back then.
Right. Yeah.
And hopefully, you talked about there are different misunderstandings about what it is. So hopefully we will get into some of that today and talk about what it really means to be an introvert and how to embrace that. And man, if you only have the label, it doesn't really help you. And I think it can be harmful, like you said. Like all it should be for is to help you really get an understanding of some common people, because we're not all the same. If we talk further, we probably have a lot in common, but we probably have different aspects of our personality that are different. Right. But it's a way to understand some things about ourselves. But if you just say, "Oh, I'm an introvert," or "I'm an extrovert," or even ambivert, whatever, it's not helpful. You really need to dive into that and understand what it means. And I know I've benefited from being in a workshop setting where people do talk about themselves and their introversion, extroversion. And you can really, when you start to explain yourself or hear other people explain themselves, you really can kind of get an understanding. So yeah, we'll get into some of those myths today for sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, the workshop that you just mentioned, I think that's one of the greatest things that leaders and supervisors can do, and most are not comfortable with it. But we did that once at work, and we took a survey, Myers-Briggs. Many people have taken that, but as a team, we sat down and shared our results, and it was a team that was, got along well and knew a bit about each other, but certainly we uncovered a lot more. People have to feel comfortable to be vulnerable with each other, which is a tough thing. But I'll tell you, by the end of that session, we bonded to a much higher degree. We understood how each of us worked and what our strengths and weaknesses were in that regard. And then we actually went to another level and we said, okay, based on what I now understand Steve likes to do and is really good at, and what he doesn't prefer to do, and what Sue and Billy also are good at, and so forth, we started to move around some of the activities that we do, because after all, if we can be doing more of what we truly have a passion for instead of the things we really don't want to do, I mean, how much more energy and success we bring to the team itself. So I think that's a great thing that you guys did and some other organizations are doing.
Yeah. And I kind of, we haven't done a lot of that over the last year and a half. So hopefully we'll get more into that. Hey, and as you're talking with your teammates or your colleagues, you see those light bulbs. Oh, that helps me understand you just a little bit more,
That's right.
That you need a little bit of time by yourself and many other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I figured out relatively late in my career that, I just needed to re-energize during the day. for many people, but certainly I think for a lot of introverts, there's enough stuff going on during the day, which we may enjoy what we're doing, but there's enough social engagements or conflict resolution issues during the day that can oftentimes drain our energy. And for me, as I think with a lot of introverts, we're generally ambitious people. We have goals, we have objectives we want to achieve. And so, we have full days packed in with meetings and other things to try and get to those objectives. But I realized that was not really beneficial because I was so packed in, I had no break. And so as the day went on, my energy level just continued to decline. And I frankly think I was probably useless by 3 o'clock. And unfortunately, by 6 o'clock, when I came in the front door at the house, I crashed on the couch and my wife and kids got the remnants of whatever was left. And I realized, even if it's just a few minutes, if I can build in some breaks during the day to take a walk outside or, some people meditate or journal or listen to a little bit of music, it just helps to boost up that energy level. And I would occasionally, depending on the day I was having, go grab my lunch, go off campus, grab my lunch by myself. And some people thought, man, that's really strange, or you don't like anybody, or, how odd that is. But I realized, one, that I needed that to be much more productive and engaging in the afternoon. But I also realized I needed to kind of clue the other people in the office on, hey, it's not that I don't like you or anything, and I'm happy to chit chat and let's grab lunch on Friday or whatever. But sometimes I just need that time. And when I was able to grant myself that flexibility, it changed a lot of my experience at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. And so my book was Minding Your Time, Success, Productivity, and time management, especially for introverts. And it's our strategies don't look the same. Just like for me, I figured out, what, I started my day, I need a little bit of time alone. So I block off the first 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then throughout the day, I need to build in some kind of break, like you're saying. And, when I was so right now, I'm still kind of half working in the office, half working at home. When I was in the office, some of that break just came from walking around to different meetings. But now I have to make sure if I'm home, getting up out of my chair and doing that. But it just looks different. It's not strange. It's just, how do I function best? And that's what you need to figure out.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think, we talked about labels earlier, but I think there's roughly, depending on what source you go to, roughly half the people in the world and in corporate workplaces are introverts. So I call us the hidden half, because we really generally lay low, and unless you observe somebody, you might not know that they're an introvert. And I know for myself, I wore this mask all day and I tried to pull it off, that I was like everybody else in the way I approached things for much of my career, until I realized that was really not. It was detrimental to my own health and not really helpful for the team either. But I really think that to the extent that we recognize that there's a lot of other people like us out there, we just need to maybe engage with each other and give ourselves some support. And then suddenly people are more comfortable to be our true selves. And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, isn't that what we're all should be striving for, is just authenticity. And then we can bring a lot more ideas to the table in a much more comfortable setting. But
yeah,
it's easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah. I go with 50%. And, I get surprised looks or reactions to that number. But when they're surprised, it's because they're using the terms that you mentioned earlier. It's they're using the wrong definition, because I know a lot of very outspoken and very confident introverts. They're just deep thinkers. And
Right.
that's the difference. We're deep thinkers. And if you can understand what you need and your strengths, that's the difference. And so, again, we just got to get the word out there, what it really is. Right. So
I agree. I think that is a lot more important than it seems, I think, because and I mentioned the dictionaries and thesauruses, and actually worked with another website to put a petition together earlier this year and submit it to some online thesauruses and dictionaries, because it was just so aggravating. And we had thousands of people sign up for that petition. And I'll tell you, every 3 months on my calendar, because as a good introvert, I have a rigid calendar plan, but I still go back to those same online resources and badger them a bit tactfully, I believe, about the importance of reflecting more accurately the definitions and synonyms of introversion, because not only because other people will see that's the whole purpose of a thesaurus sometimes, but it's not just the general public or extroverts, but it's introverts as well. And like we were talking about, when you're younger or you don't have the confidence, I mean, we absorb those and we sometimes become those. And so I think it's so important that we at least get more accurate definitions, because it's so misleading.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that in your long career, like at what point did you finally say, I need to embrace this, who I am?
It was relatively late in my career. I was in my early 40s. I was at the tail end of a 3-year assignment in London, actually, and which was great from a family perspective. But from a work perspective, I found it to be really difficult because everything was new and different. I was with the same company, but everybody in the office was new. It was a global role, so I was traveling a lot, and my team was virtual, which personally, I find it harder to build those relationships without being able to sit down sort of one-on-one. For me, that networking intimacy is what I call it, that it's really helpful. I'm not going to do well online, do as well online. And I'm certainly not going to do well with 50 people in the room. And so I had to find a way to do that, but it was really difficult. And I found that 3-year assignment to be stressful from a number of ways. And as that wound down and I had to think about what was my next assignment or what did I want to pursue next within the company, I thought, now I need to make a change. I need to, but I have to decide, am I going to change my company or my career, or am I going to change who I am in order to conform more and maybe appease the kind of outside world? Or am I going to actually change the way I manage and the way I lead teams to be more aligned with my true authentic self? And it sounds simple, but I had worked at that time, over 2 decades, trying to make sure people didn't really know my true self. And which I think is so demeaning for people that, people like me and many others that feel like I'm not good enough to be my true self. So I'm going to pretend I'm somebody else. And I just decided during that 3 years, I was suffering from a lot of unhealthy things. I would go to the doctor at least once a month about some kind of a rash or a muscle ache or something like that, shingles. And he said, I can help you with these things, but it's all stress related. Our bodies are pretty incredible in that if we're undergoing stress, it'll eventually come to the surface. And he said, the only way you can really stop this and improve your life is to remove that stress. And I've decided at the end of that three years, it was just enough. But I didn't want to leave a company that was good to me and I had good experiences with. I just wanted to work and lead differently. And I had the opportunity when I came back to the States in a new role to really turn over a new leaf and try and lead more authentically. And it was different than I had done before, and it was different from a lot of the people around me. But I found so much comfort in being able to do that and take the mask off that that was the turning point in my life.
Okay. What's an example of how it was different for you?
I used to I used to go to a lot of work conferences. And so, there's conference meetings and presentations during the day, and then there's cocktails, or worse yet, they break apart the meetings during the day to ensure that you have social time in between all those sessions. And that was just really a struggle for me. And I remember calling my wife once. I was at a conference in Peru, and I called her in the middle of the night, and I said, this is really difficult. I'm not sure how I'm making it through. And I was there with a person that was on my team. So I felt responsible to kind of show him around, but I was new to the business as well. And so kind of injecting myself into these discussions with people I don't really know was anxiety ridden, to say the least. later that night, after I got back to my room, and I wrote my wife an email, because I realized I probably scared the crap out of her because I was really on the edge. And I said, I'm not falling apart. It's okay. The deal's over. So I'm coming home. But I realized that was, in honesty, I was falling apart at that moment in time. What I've realized since then is, I don't think my manager sent me to this conference to, hey, go mingle with 100 people and bring back 100 business cards of people that you met and all this other stuff, and that you worked the room. He wanted me to go and learn, and he wanted me to go and meet some people to develop greater relationships. How I did that really was up to me. And, or at least that's the way most, I believe, managers should be leading that way. And so after that, I realized that when I had conferences, and I still had plenty in the rest of my career, I would line up more one-on-one, two-on-two sort of meetings during the day. And so we would develop relationships, right? And we'd have a much calmer, nice casual conversation like we're having, where we could get to know each other. And then we'd also obviously talk business, and we'd have some opportunities. And I would come back, at the end of that with maybe 5 or 10 meetings that I'd had, 5 or 10 business cards, if you will, that I could follow up on. But I developed really deeper relationships. And if I wanted to go tackle that big cocktail at the end of the day, it was kind of like it was an option for me. And if I did, I'd go in there and I'd approach a couple of tables, and I'd bring, in my mind at least, I'd bring a list of things that I wanted to talk about or questions that I had. So I wouldn't freeze up when I got to that table. And it helped me to have more conversations, but I'd already really accomplished the objective of the conference in the first place. And so sometimes I would stay for 30 minutes and I'd leave. And other times I would stay for 30 and I enjoyed it and met some of the people, or saw some of the people I'd had meetings with, and we'd chat again. And it was easier since I had broken the ice with some of the individuals. And so sometimes I'd be there for an hour or two, and other times I would leave. And either way, in the past, I would just beat myself up. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of introverts, is sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And, I should have talked more to people. Why did I freeze up and I couldn't have that conversation? This is what I'm here to do. But I realized that was different. And so I could give myself support even if I didn't go to the cocktail at the end of the day. I look at all the things I learned and the people that I met during the day, or I went to the conference and I made that effort. And so, a lot of it was just celebrating and being a cheerleader for the effort that I was making. And it really changed a lot of my approach at work.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I really relate to that. Introversion and extroversion, it's not good or bad. They're just different. And we're going to have different approaches. Mm-hmm. And I learned that too. It's like, okay, when you're going to an event like that, what's your goal? And you said, to build 5 or 10 good relationships, mm-hmm. and not the 100 that your extroverted colleague wants to do. And they're not good or bad, but if you accomplish that, then that's what you set out to do. And maybe you stay for a long period of time, or maybe you accomplished your goal and you let yourself go back to your room or go out, on this new town or whatever. But it's what is your goal, and what are your strategies? How do you prepare for that? And how do you employ your introverted strengths, but also honor your introverted needs? And yeah, that's a common one. If you don't understand that, networking can definitely provoke a lot of anxiety in introverts.
Yeah, and I think that's really tough, because let's face it, no matter whether you're working in a big company or a small company or your own company, there is networking or socializing, whatever you want to call it, anywhere for any job. And so we have to do it. And it helps to be able to do that well. But the key is that we have to do it our way. And if we do it our way and we think about the strengths that we have and give ourselves our own support, then we can actually do it quite well and even enjoy it. But we have to do it in a different way than the people around us are generally doing it, or at least the extroverts in the room.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about introverted strengths. So in your first book, again, I know we're going to talk more about your second book, but in your first book, I definitely picked up on that. Part of your success in your career was that you were very analytical, and I relate to that because I am as well. And not all introverts are going to be that way. We all have our different gifts, but I mean, that definitely comes from, being a deep thinker. So what would you say are some of introverted strengths maybe that you have or you've seen in others?
So I'll tell you one of the things that we have on my website, which I was real excited to put out there earlier this year, was a introvert strength quiz. And we've actually had over 1,500 people take it, which is amazing. And so when they take it, and it's free and it doesn't take very long to take, and then you get a report of what are your, it looks at 8 different qualities or characteristics. And it says, which are kind of your stronger ones. We all have strengths, and I wouldn't say the others are weaknesses, but there's some that are more prominent. And then there's some information on how can we grow or use those strengths, and what are some of the cautions of overuse on some of those strengths. But what I found is the biggest, most common strength for those 1,500 people, and certainly for me as well, and you alluded to it, is preparation. So many introverts lean on that. Now, not everybody, because we are all different, but the majority of the people that took the quiz said, I like to prepare. And by answering certain questions, we recognize that is a strength, and I think it reduces our anxiety. So I think that extroverts would love to just roll into a cocktail party or a dinner and they just start chatting. And I think their natural curiosity takes hold, and they don't have any apprehensions about that. Or they roll into a business meeting and they just, whatever comes at the top of their head, which sometimes we can be envious of that, but sometimes the things that are on the top of people's heads are not necessarily the best information to share in meetings. But I realized that was not my style. And so if we, as an introvert, if we can embrace that preparation and make sure we put some time aside for that. So if I know I have a big meeting in the afternoon, I've learned that I actually need to block out some time. Maybe it's right before the meeting, maybe it's the day before, it depends on the kind of meeting, and think about, hopefully I've got pre-read or an agenda so I can think about what's that meeting going to be about. And what do I have? What expertise or knowledge or curiosity do I have to add to that meeting? And so I'm bringing a different kind of analysis to the meeting than some of the people that are just talking off the top of their head. I think meetings need both of those, but it certainly helped me to feel more comfortable that I had thought about what my questions were going to be, or my points, or my issues that I wanted to share in meetings or in social events like we talked a little bit about earlier. So I think preparation is big. I think another really common one, which I appreciate and had to learn about in a different way, was listening or observation. I think a lot of people look at those of us that might be listening or observing and think, they're just not into the discussion, right? Or they're out of the loop, or they're shy or whatnot. But in actuality, I think what I've realized is listening is learning. I mean, we're sitting there and we're observing body language. We're listening to what these 3 different people say. And what we bring to the table, I think one of the great unique things that we can bring to the table is we can take those different insights that are floating around the room, and we can synthesize those into unique perspectives. And so then we can share, what I'm observing is this, or here's a question that kind of comes out of the discussion that we've had that other people may not share. And I think it can really bring the conversation in a meeting or in a social setting to a different level. And so I used to think that listening was that I was just being quiet and it was my way to get in my introverted comfort zone and just back out of conversations. But then I realized that it's a great opportunity to learn and contribute in a unique way. And so it's one of those strengths that we need to really lean on. And I guess the third one I'll share would be thoughtfulness. So a lot of people think, and I definitely fell into this group for a long time, that, introverts are not very sociable and we don't develop relationships because we're either nervous or shy or unprepared or overwhelmed or all of the above, or whatever the case may be. But really, we have, if we're in a comfortable and I would say more of a safe environment, then we can have lots of conversations like this one today, or, with other people that we work or we socialize with, that can be very thoughtful, right? I mean, we have this natural curiosity. We can ask questions about their family or whatever. We can really bring that conversation to usually a much deeper level, because, as you say, we're kind of deep thinkers. So we want to kind of skip that chit chat pretty quickly and get into more tangible conversations about what you're about. What are your passions about? What do you love at work? What are your issues, and that sort of stuff? And so that thoughtfulness really makes for a unique kind of relationship. I had somebody that did a guest blog on our website, and she was definitely an introvert, and she had a career in sales and marketing. And so her guest blog was about, most people would think that introverts are not good salespeople. And she disagreed vehemently. And she was a perfect example. And she said, yes, I approached it differently. I approached it with my authentic self, but I had perhaps less relationships than my extroverted cohorts, but I had such unique relationships with my customers, and we knew each other on a deeper level. And so I understood more about what they needed from our company or from their customers, and we could help connect and deliver on that. And so I thought that was really a great way to kind of embrace your thoughtfulness and make it work for you. And so I think, those are a few strengths out of many that introverts sometimes go a long time without recognizing that it's a positive.
Yeah, great points on strengths. And, preparation is so key. We
Mm.
are deep thinkers. We like to think, but we also need to think.
Yeah.
And, listening is, you can gather all the information. And, that's another thing that we don't always recognize is extroverts speak in order to think. And so they're sharing a lot of information, whereas the introvert typically is going to put everything together in their head and share that most important thing. And
Mhm.
so, it might be perceived that we're not talking as much, but we're really sharing what we think is most important.
Yeah. One of the things that I talk about in my second book is just around introverts in leadership roles, because I think on the surface, certainly extroverts would probably say introverts are not necessarily leadership material. They seem to be all these negative stigmas that we talked about earlier, and slower, quiet, whatever. And but in actuality, most of the research these days says we've moved far away from this command and control kind of leadership, where somebody is the big person in the room and will tell everybody what to do and how to do it and all this sort of stuff. It doesn't really work these days. People don't want to work for that person. That culture doesn't really emanate out to their customers in a positive way. And people want to work in organizations where they can participate. The organization and the type of culture that introverts can create in organizations is really unique, and oftentimes makes for the most engaging sort of organizations and the happiest employees, because they're able to collaborate and participate. And most people at work, that's largely what they want. Most studies say it's not really the money that makes people leave. It's the fact that they're not involved. They don't feel like they have a say in the conversations or discussions, or they just don't feel comfortable enough. And I think that's, really unfortunate. But I think it's incumbent upon not just the organization, but it is incumbent upon us as introverts to make sure we participate in our own authentic way, but that we bring our ideas to the table, because the companies really want that. And we have lots of things we can share.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned leadership, and a bit ago you mentioned sales. It's funny that people say, can an introvert do this or can an introvert do that?
Mhm.
And it's like, absolutely. They can be amazing leaders. They can be amazing salespeople, but the approach is just going to look different, right?
Right. Yeah. Somebody asked me a while back, and it prompted a blog, because I just thought it was such an interesting question. Simple, but they said, well, so what are the best jobs for introverts? And much like you just said, it's any job that you have an interest, skills, and passion for. And so there isn't any job that I would, you don't have to stay in a room all by yourself. and feel like that's what my lot in life is. If you want to do that, that's great. But if you want to be a salesperson, a leader, a speaker at a conference, you can do anything that you want to do. But you just have to figure that out and figure out how to do it your way.
Yeah, absolutely. Using your strengths.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've gotten that before, like, oh, you're an introvert. You just want to be alone all the time. I'm like, no, that would drive me crazy. I need some
Right.
time, but I need some relationships and connections and collaboration with folks.
Mhm.
But I need some time. So it's just funny the misperceptions that are out there.
Yeah. I think that's
So
why, I mean, sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
So, but I think that's one reason why it is, maybe it's not fair that it should be our responsibility, but I do think it's incumbent upon us in general as introverts to, one, advocate for ourselves. Don't get steamrolled by people that happen to be louder or grab more airtime in a meeting or whatnot. Speak for ourselves and feel, doesn't mean we have to grab half the airtime with the other person, but make sure we're respected and that we have the opportunity to share our strengths. And then I do think we have to advocate to some extent for introverts in general, because some may not be comfortable or ready yet, or even aware yet, in order to kind of carve out their space in the team. But teams need to be more open to that, and so we need to help educate others, educate other introverts, educate extroverts. It's not, I have no ill will toward extroverts at all. I think that the best teams and companies are made up of a very diverse group of people, and diversity in all aspects. And that includes introverts and extroverts getting along, respecting each other, sharing ideas. And that's the best arrangement. But, a lot of extroverts don't recognize that. And in part because maybe they don't even recognize who the introverts are, or they believe in some of the misinformed stigmas and definitions that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. You put it very well. There's a diversity that comes by personality, and we need everybody, and we all have our unique strengths and gifts.
Right.
And so part of it, like you said, is helping others in the workplace understand themselves. So it's helping the introvert understand themselves, helping the extrovert understand the introvert, and vice versa. And I
Hmm.
think that is a big part of leadership is really understanding who's working for you and helping them understand each other.
Right.
What are your thoughts on how to do that as a leader?
I think I would say as a leader and as an introverted leader to lean on our strengths and by example. And so, listening is always a good place to start for anything. Listening, asking questions, letting our natural curiosity take over, creating that space for them. A lot of introverts, certainly myself included, I need some time and space. So, if I go into a brainstorming debate on a topic and I'm told the topic, a second before we get started around this round table, I'm not going to feel very comfortable, and I'm probably not going to participate very well. I need a little bit of time and space. So I would encourage team leaders to, when they have a meeting, issue an agenda, issue a pre-read if it's a complex topic. Some people may not look at either one of them, but most of the time, most introverts are going to look through that and should carve out some time to think about what they want to cover and discuss in the meeting. And that way, I consider that I went through or was subjected to introverts paralysis a lot of the time. I get in these situations, social or meeting, and I just kind of freeze up. And it's like, I know the topic, or I know I can communicate, right? I'm able to socialize, but I just freeze up. Maybe it's a level of anxiety that I have when I'm in these sort of situations. But if we create that time and space to prepare, then I don't freeze up and I can just get into the flow. And introverts in general can get into that flow. And so I think it's really, introverts aren't asking for pity or excuses from their leaders. They just want respect and they want understanding. So if you're a leader and you're an extrovert, to really just understand more, learn about what introversion is. If you're a leader and an introvert, in addition to that, I would really say one of the greatest things you can do is offer up your introversion. Share that with people. Doesn't mean you have to go rent a billboard on the side of the highway, but you can have those conversations one-on-one with some of your staff, with your own manager, and share that kind of information, not in a, hey, I'm telling you this because that's why I'm not the loudest person in the room, but in the light of, I bring all these strengths to the table, and I want to continue to do that. And there are many other introverts in your team that have those same kinds of strengths. And we just need to create, as a team, we need to create that time and space, because companies are paying a lot of money to their resources, generally their biggest expenditure. And so they should want to get everything out of them. But it's up to the organization and the leaders to create that environment where everybody feels comfortable to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like we talked about the label earlier on. You have to get past that. You have to say, just like you're saying, here's what my strengths are, here's what my needs are. And I
Mhm.
mean, if we're working together, I want you to be your best. And if I understand, hey, that time Steve needs alone, that's where he's going to do his best work. Just because I don't need it or I don't need as much doesn't mean it's not
Mhm.
a valid need. And so I think you hit it right there on the head that, we just need to articulate what it is that we need to be successful and how we can use our strengths to do that.
I agree, definitely.
I'm excited for your new book, The Corporate Introvert. What haven't we covered yet that you're excited about in your new book?
I think that when I've talked to some people about the book, and they ask, well, so what's the key? What's the trick for me to be able to be a good leader, and or how can I best manage a meeting? And the answer for me, for either one of those questions, is first we have to start a bit at the beginning. We have to back up a little bit to really make it worthwhile and hit home. And when I say back up, it's important that we understand what introversion really is, that we understand our strengths, that we therefore can practice our strengths. If we're great planners or good planners, how can we embed that into our day so that we can be better prepared to lead, to have maybe those difficult coaching conversations at times, to have successful meetings, whether we're leading or participating in them. So I think it really starts with understanding who we are. And I think once we're able to actually understand that and apply that throughout the day, then whether you're an introvert that suffered from low self-esteem or not, it builds confidence when we're able to stand tall and say, this is who I am. And this is, whether we say it verbally or through our actions, this is who I am. And this is a successful way to contribute to a team. And so I think that, so about a third of my book is talking about, what is introversion and who are we and what are our strengths and how can we apply those in different situations. Then we go into some of those situations and provide a lot of strategies and models for how to have successful meetings or network or so forth. And then the last bit of the book is on leadership. So how, as a manager, can I lead a successful team? And using my strengths that we talk about earlier in the book, how can we make sure that we're doing it our way? Because that's the right way for us to manage a successful team. So I think it's just really goes back to the authenticity at the very beginning.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you want to mention?
Just happy to be on with you. I think that some of the groups that we're talking to are people, whether it's the leaders in companies or the employees in companies, because I think both have the opportunity to learn, right? And diversity and inclusion and equality is an important theme, a very important theme, as it has been and should be in organizations. But as you mentioned earlier, this is really diversity of personality and perspective. And so I think we just need to kind of educate ourselves, educate our leadership, and those that kind of get it, the light bulb goes off. They perform at a different level, and it's a different level of bonding within the team, and really getting to the point of getting the ultimate contributions from the team. I also think the other group that I focus on when I talk to folks are those like in the college ranks, upperclassmen. because a lot of those people are going to find their way into corporate America. And as we said, roughly half of them are introverts. And I know when I was 20, if I knew what I kind of scrape my way through to figure out over the decades ahead of what I was going to get into, what are kind of the corporate cultures in general, but more importantly, how I could use learn about my own strengths and use those and not feel ashamed to use them, but actually proud to use them, that it would have made a huge difference in people in my career early on and in other people's careers. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to accelerate their own journey through those 5 phases we talked about at the beginning by just kind of looking around and learning.
Absolutely. So we come by introversion very naturally, as I believe, but the sooner we can learn to embrace it, you can find success in your own strengths. And definitely, if you're not already confident, you can gain confidence by understanding yourself. So very good work, Steve. I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
And to tell us again what your website is and where people can find your book.
So the book is out there on Amazon and online and a few other places as well. But the easiest way to find me is just on my website, beyondintroversion.com. And so there's weekly blogs. There's the quiz, a couple of quizzes, one of which we talked about. There's other resources available for introverts to kind of learn more about who they are and ways for them to embrace their true self. So I would certainly encourage people to go check out the website, and both books are available there as well.
All right. Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Keep up your amazing work. The world needs it.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. And you keep up the great work, because I think your podcast is providing a very important platform to a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com. Check out the website, quietandstrong.com. I'll add social media channels for me and my guest to the show notes. Please comment on social media posts. Send me topics or guests you'd like to see on the show. There's so many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.